Good morning and welcome to The Art of Composition. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. I thought I would look at the photographer Martin Parr today. And I came across Martin's work years ago on Magnum. I have to admit, I didn't really like his photographs at first because I didn't understand some of his subject matter. But as I learned design, I developed a whole new respect for his work. And the other reason I didn't really fully understand what he was doing is because Martin Parr doesn't fit into that typical style of Bresson-like street photography. He's shooting in color for the most part, and he uses an on-camera flash, which is very much against what Bresson believed in. But like all the other video lectures, I just thought I would go through and point out a few things that may or may not help the photographer take better photographs. So let me start on the first page. There was one here that I really liked, and I'll start with that one, and that's this photograph here. The first thing that stands out to me about this photograph, and I've never seen this one before until a few minutes ago, you have a circular movement running through here, and that is obtained through the bend in the waist here along with the elbow and the arm. It's moving down here and it continues down. This arm is in the same position as this one here, so it creates a movement, and it travels through here with the curves in the feet, and it moves up through here and around. That's the first thing I noticed. And also because the figures are they're lower in the frame. In other words, you have less space here at the bottom than you do at the top. It gives you space to move around in this circular fashion here. This is a very difficult photograph to get. You have to look at all the limbs and how Martin Parr has caught them at the right time to create that circular movement. So something to be aware of. And a lot of these I have not seen before, so this is my first time going through these. Martin Parr is interesting. He always has these, he does a lot of these close-ups, and I have to admit, I love this style of photography. I like the on-camera flash because it gives a surreal effect. A lot of his photographs remind me of images taken in the mid to late 60s, the color and the flash and so on. And he does a really good job of balancing out the two. But when you're looking at something like this, again, you have this circular movement here because you have the hair sweeping through the position of the woman's fingers and hand. It creates this movement along with the steering wheel, and you're doing this. But the other thing is too, you have this hair piece right here, and it's also moving you around like this. But notice how the profile is clean against its background. You have a horizontal line here which runs right in line with her chin and her jawline, so it's a nice connection here, coincidence here. But also look at the vertical lines and how they're lining up with her profile. This stuff that I point out when it comes to how the subject relates to their background, how it overlays on the background, in my opinion, this makes or breaks a photograph. I'm very much aware of this when I'm evaluating my own photographs. And if you purchase the video, The Artistry of Photography, Martin Parr talks about how difficult it is to get these photographs, and I believe it, because all of these elements have to come into play. And it's important to understand this stuff when you're evaluating your own work. Again, he's doing the same thing here. You have a sweeping motion. The hand and the arm is moving up along with the comb, and it creates a movement like this. But again, the subject's face reads clearly against these elements in the background, even though they're out of focus. Just because they're out of focus doesn't mean things don't have to overlay correctly. And you have nice separation between the elements right in here. But again, you have this movement through here. And it continues like this. Beautiful black and white. The figures read clearly against the background. It's interesting because these are nicely balanced too. And I talk about balance a lot in these video lectures. In this figure here, you have a nice negative shape in between the darker values and this rock right here. And what else is interesting too is the men are facing opposite directions, which gives you a sort of a push-pull effect. But it's nicely balanced because you have one figure on each side and then you have this area in the center. But again, notice here you have a nice space between the edge of this rock here. It wouldn't work if the photographer cut the frame right here. You need this space in between this rock. Very clean image. Simple but not simple. And what I like to do is when I go through these, I try to select the ones that really stand out to me on first glance. And when you're evaluating your own work, when you bring them down to this size, the size of a postage stamp or a thumbnail, you can evaluate your photographs fairly quickly. But again, here, again, he's using the on-camera flash. I think he does this pretty much for almost everything. But look how the profiles overlap their backgrounds. Everything is nicely separated and clean between all these figures. There's a lot going on here. And again, you have this downward motion and it's moving like this. You have the female looking down. This little girl is leading you over here. And it moves up and around. And one thing that's really important too is gazing direction. And this is what I was just referring to. The gazing direction of the subjects you're photographing can move the viewer around the frame. For example, you have this woman, she's looking down, which makes the eye move down here. Then it's picked up with this girl here. She's taking you over in this path. And then with the dirt and the arm, it moves you up here. And then this guy's direction is bringing you back to here. So you have this enclosure reinforced with gazing direction. So she's down, over, sweeps up, and then his gazing direction brings you back here. And this baby in the back is bringing you down here as well. So you have this element of the woman and the baby. They're forcing the viewer down. This girl brings it over, up, and around. Gazing direction is very important. I talk about it in my user's guides. So something to be aware of. I don't talk about it a lot, but in that case, in that photograph, it's really important. This is a good example of balance. Two elements here, two elements here. And the fact that this figure is closer to the edge balances out this figure closer to the edge here. So you have 2 and 2 and it balances out. Everything reads clearly against the background. Nothing is confusing about this photograph. The upward motion of this figure here with the bent knee and the raised foot, Brezan did this a lot. It forces the viewer up. The cow's gazing direction brings you over here, and then this woman brings you back down this path. She's looking this way. And I'm going to try to find a good variety of photographs in his body of work. Again, here's a good example of good negative space between elements in a composition. Look at how all of this space between this man and this statue and this woman, they're not blending together. Even when the man is raising the spoon or fork or whatever it is to his mouth, there's even space between the mouth and the fork. This is gorgeous right through here. And it doesn't blend in with the statue. There's good separation, and the same with his head as well. But also this element over here on the right hand side gives it balance. If you put your thumb over this area here, it would fall out of balance. But this gives you that balance of the photograph. repeating ideas. Both women have their hands to their face. You'll see this a lot in his work. And this is something that I look for when I'm photographing myself. This is something you can see as it's happening. It happens quickly, but if you're aware of it, you can capture it. And that's what he's doing. He's repeating an idea here. For me, this figure is about balance. You have this figure here closer to the bottom of the frame, but his feet are acting as pointing devices. And then you have a path that's sort of moving in a zigzag fashion here. But all of this area here with the dark values in here give balance to the figure down here. You have this dark mass right here, but you also have this darker mass up here, which contrasts nicely with the snow. So you have this balance. I think if this area here was more white, it wouldn't be as balanced, in my opinion. And you do have to be aware of how values play out, whether you're using black and white or color. And in a lot of the painting books that I recommend, like Aristides' book, she talks a lot about value. And that, again, is another reason why I always recommend photographers read art books, because it talks about the stuff that photography books never talk about. I never understood photography books. They're really pretty much worthless. They don't teach you anything about art. But this is a good example of really good overlapping. You have a lot of figures going on here. Nice cut along the edge here. Beautiful cut right here. But notice how all the figures overlap. Clearly there's no bad overlaps in any of this at all. All the figures read clearly. When you look at photographs like this in your contact sheets or you're using Lightroom, you know almost right away you have a good photograph. Same thing here. Multiple figures, but they all read clearly against their background. No bad overlaps. Notice how the hats stand out against the white background, the black hats, and beautiful negative shapes in between all of these figures. But you almost view these three as one group and then these two as another group, and this is where the balance comes in. Henry Rankin-Poor talks about this. When you're arranging multiple figures in a composition, how they're spaced out matters, because depending on how you clump the figures or the figures are clumped together will either give your composition balance or not. And for example, like I said, you have three here that I view this as one clump. Then these figures up here, because they're higher in the frame and they're separated out from each other. These are all overlapping. These figures here are overlapping one another. So in my mind, visually, this comes across as one group. Then you have the two here as a group. Henry Rankin-Poor's book is really important when it comes to taking good photographs. I was never crazy about these types of images. It sort of reminds me of William Eggleston in a way. But good design otherwise. I can't argue with the design. Notice how the lettering reads clearly against this finger here. And there's a nice edge cut here. It's a well-designed photograph. It's not something that interests me. But as I've said before, I tend not to look at subject matter too much. Or I don't evaluate a photograph based solely on subject is what I really mean. Again, like something like this does not appeal to me, but I know what he's going for here. He's repeating this shape right here and here. This elliptical shape right here. But the photograph doesn't interest me. In food, I don't get that, but that's okay. I don't have to understand everything he's doing. I'm more interested in the design of it all. And this doesn't do anything for me, but good clean edges, simple arrangement, but not so easy to capture. Photography is very deceptive. It looks easy, but it's not. And this one, you have nice figure separation between this element right here. If I was photographing, this is what I would look for. I would know that I was dealing with something constant, meaning this, and then I would position myself that I felt compositionally was strong, and I would wait for something to happen. And he might have done that. I'm simply looking at this and thinking how I would have photographed it. I would have made sure that this element here, with it looks like postcards, wouldn't give me a bad overlap in the background on the hills, so I could set myself up, take a quick shot, look at it digitally, and then wait for some figures to enter, and that's what I would have done. The figures are separated from this element here. Nice balance. Good photograph. Simple arrangement, but good photograph. It takes thought, though. It's not something that you just snap the shutter and you get. You have to know what you're doing. I did a video lecture a while back on a photograph. I had a photograph very similar to this with just windows, but I didn't think the photograph in the article was good, but this one to me is good because you have a really good idea and you've got good composition. You have 3 pink windows at the top, 3 blue on the bottoms. This is interesting to me, and I would have photographed this. And I may have waited for somebody to walk in, and I might not have. It could work either way. But notice here that this pole is separated from the window. Depending on where you were standing to take this photograph, it would shift the position of that pole. And this is what a good photograph looks like for a very simple arrangement, simple subject, but well balanced. I definitely would have photographed something like that. I'll just look at a few more here. I won't go crazy with this today. Nice close-up. The blonde figure, her face, reads against this dark area here. Gazing direction brings you into this area here with the hand, and this is where the focal point is. And the position of this woman's hands creates this movement here. This might have been 2 or 3 frames for me, because I'm not as skilled as Martin Parr. But it's interesting when you watch the video, the artistry of photography, of how many photographs he actually does take. It's quite a few. He definitely loves the close-ups. Like this doesn't do anything for me. I really don't like pictures of food, but that's just personal preference. And like I said, I'll just look at maybe 1 or 2 more of these. This is a good idea right here. We've all seen this at a beach. You simply just wait. You know these figures are going to be pretty much dormant. They're not going to move much. So you position yourself where you have a good composition, and then I would have taken several frames of this to make sure that the elements in the background are well executed. To me, this might have been, I don't know, 5 or 10 frames. But the figures are separated from this element here. Nice dramatic poses in the figures. But this is something that we've seen. We've all seen this photograph before. You just have to know how to approach it. But that's going to be it for today. I hope this helps, and I will be doing more of these in the future. So thanks for joining me.